drugs are a no-no for me. But when reefer became legalized, like many people, I started to rethink and research it. I got curious about the medicinal and recreational properties. A drug that was once the gateway to hard narcotics is now socially acceptable. And with the growing numbers of seniors now in the market, I wanted to pause and learn more about the impact marijuana and cannabis is having in the present day and in the future. So we're gonna roll up on Mary Jane on this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. I wanted to create a safe space to have uncomfortable yet transformative conversations that move people, amplifying the voices of those who are underrepresented and who inspire positive change. I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy. I'm going to welcome Tokunbo Anafilage. Ooh, I love saying that, Brooklyn, Anafilage. But welcome. You're going to be one of our regulars dealing and focusing primarily on business. So thank you so much, Tokunbo, for joining us. And now I'm going to introduce Tremaine Wright. Now you are the chairwoman of the Cannabis Control Board, and also a former assemblywoman. That's how I know you as an assemblywoman. And then Jason Starr. Now, of course, you're an attorney with an impact office for Revel. I've got a question for my panelistas. Let me start with you, Valerie. Do you think that folks who have been formerly incarcerated for cannabis should have a leg up when it comes to starting cannabis dispensaries?
Hi, thank you for having me, Toni. And absolutely, the inequities in the adjudication and institutionalization of folks with, prior cannabis convictions has been just very much so in the Black community. Mm-hmm. So we need to have reparative investment and reparative programming, taking on the points of reparations to ensure that people have equity to build themselves up in terms of developing their business. So absolutely.
So this idea of you did the crime, you do the time is pretty much, it's ridiculous, isn't it, when it comes to cannabis?
Well, they did the crime and they did the time, and now there's an opportunity for them to become entrepreneurs and learn and develop a business, because it feeds into the building of Black wealth, which we have been inequitably taken out of in our society.
Right, in that we're 10% of white wealth, essentially.
Absolutely. So this is prior convictions, not current. Mm-hmm. Time done, time served. Now let's give these individuals an opportunity to grow and contribute to the economy of our Black communities.
Hear, hear. Now that you know I'm biased to Cuba, so what's your answer?
I totally agree. For so long, businesses of color who've been impacted by the awful war on drugs in the 80s just want to have an opportunity to participate. And with the industry being so new in New York City, the faster we can get businesses that look like us to the front of the line to be able to tap some of these resources, which they're already, in most cases, being able to start a business already, So that's kind of giving them that opportunity to now legalize that, A lot of people are hustlers in New York City, and able to kind of think on their feet and be able to communicate what they need to be able to get people to understand and then buy into if it's a brand or a service. And so being able to help people who already have momentum and understanding how to talk with customers and be able to tap other resources and stakeholders. It doesn't matter if you've been convicted, You should be able to everyone should have a second chance.
So I want to pitch the same question to both of you. What do you think, Tremaine, in terms of those, crime and punishment? I think we talked about that at some point, the crime and punishment folks.
Yes, I think that time has passed with regards to the conversation around cannabis. I think that we have come to realize that we need to have a restorative justice lens when we're thinking about it. A lot of the harms that were done to communities of color in particular, but I'm going to say New Yorkers in general, they really were harmed across this state because of over enforcement on really what most people would not consider the cannabis crimes if we asked them what they were. It's a lot of people who were just holding, people who had enough for their own use, young people that were swept up in sweeps in their neighborhoods while they were playing ball. We were talking about people who were kind of living their life and doing their own thing and ended up harmed in a way that they now had to rethink how they apply to college, whether they can get a job, where do they get to live, or if they get to return to the home that their families were living in. Or do they even get to keep control and parent their own children? So I think when I'm envisioning what restorative justice looks like in this moment, we're talking about the harms across the board to these entire communities. Because while the individuals carried the brunt,
Yeah, what about
it
the
was
families?
really the
What about
entire
the community?
community.
The entire community, when you look at the destabilizing of our families, right?
That's right.
Goodness. So, Jason, what about you? I think I've got a unanimous panel. I don't think that you're going to pivot, but anyway.
Without question, and I'll just say, for a long time, New York State and New York City specifically has had the largest, most robust cannabis market in the world. And I think that's why there's so much excitement about the potential opportunity for what the legal cannabis industry could look like here in the city and in the state. But in relation to the question you asked, that market was operated and maintained by stakeholders, business owners, and the fruits of that market went to account for some of the things that government policy took out of our community. That market kept the lights on, it kept the rents paid, it paid for college tuitions, it provided loans to small businesses that couldn't go get traditional loans in banks. It was in many ways—
You're talking about the underground economy?
the underground economy in many ways, much like the numbers game did as a predecessor market, right? So I think when you think about Dr. King's words at the March on Washington, talking about a promissory note that has come due, I think about this industry as a promissory note that has come due to this state, and definitely folks who suffer the most direct consequences, incarceration, criminal punishment system impacts, certainly should be front of the line to cash in on that promissory note.
So there's this issue of stigma in the Black community as well. How do we combat that? So many people still think of it as reefer, marijuana. The cannabis, I imagine, was a brand change, right? We call it cannabis so that people can accept it. What do you think about that?
I think we
Tremaine?
call it cannabis because that's the name of the plant.
Thank you.
Scientific.
Thank you. Right.
We call coriander coriander, we're going to call
Right,
oregano
yes,
oregano, and we're going
yes.
to call cannabis cannabis. It is a plant, and I think that this is the work we will destigmatize the plant and all of its uses and its applications, and it will make it— that's what's going to open the doors for innovation, for growth, for access, for people to really learn what this is and what opportunities are associated with it, what its history has been. I think that's what the destigmatization will be doing. And I believe that here in New York, we've been engaging in these conversations for at least the past almost 10 years. So we've been slowly educating people, helping them to realize that it exists in its many forms, and that it's something that they can avail themselves of.
Now the THC piece of it is, meaning, how does that fit in? Is cannabis even with the THC?
It's the plant. It's like coffee. There are different levels of caffeine on the different beans, and there's different levels of THC in the various cannabis plants. So we were gonna— the same way we've all developed a language for coffee, and we know what kind of brew we're going to pick up, people are going to develop the same kind of understanding of cannabis. And what does it mean to utilize THC and or CBD? If they're going with sativa or indica, they'll have a vocabulary to actually speak.
Let's talk about the vocabulary, right? The indica, the sativa, all of this is so brand new. It's in its infancy. Is there a move to make this is a move to make it acceptable, correct, Jason?
I think, like Chair Wright was saying, we want to first of all, look at the history, right? Like the term marijuana was a very intentional language, right? That really spoke to, at least in part, some of the early regulation and early political movement around regulation and prohibition, stemming from fears of Mexican immigrants. They were in what we call Texas, but what they call Mexico. So we were on their land, obviously. But yeah, it was really part and parcel, right, with framing and developing a narrative around this plant as something that is inherently dangerous, and certainly something that would be destabilizing to what was then seen as proper, normal American society. So, I'm not too caught up on, how people refer to the plant, but I do think in an effort to properly educate and to destigmatize, really talking about the cannabis plant, the varietals, and really the cannabinoids. I think that's really maybe the most exciting thing, because we have this system in our body, an endocannabinoid system that is a part of our biological construction, that are just waiting on to be introduced to the various cannabinoids in the plant, right? We talk about THC, maybe far too much, because there are hundreds of cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. And what we have an opportunity to do now in this education moment is to also open up research and understand more about what other ways might this botanical serve our bodies and our health and our wellness.
So Valerie, I think you want to
Yeah, I was going to echo that because of the various types of plants and the varietals that were talked about. These are things that could be helpful, right, to someone as they go through certain health issues. And I think that that's very important to talk about that in a very real way, because that helps destigmatize the use of it for just like one particular purpose, which was basically villainized, right? Just to get a little bit back to your point, Jason, about the economics of it and the historical economics of it. It was a way to build up, a stronger economy, particularly in our impacted communities. So, we can almost say that it was attacked, right, to ensure that our economy stayed at a certain place. But now here we are in this space where it could be, or should be, and is, in New York, a way to ensure that we are giving opportunities to people who have not had the same economic, opportunities toward capital, and we're still having these conversations about it being villainized. So I see it as an issue going toward our equity for, in particular, Black communities.
That's an excellent point, which is going to drive my next one, which is it showing up as an opportunity, Tremaine? I'm hearing all kinds of things about farmers being left holding the weed, holding the bag, but how is that process moving, that those who are formerly incarcerated aren't dealing with licensing delays, aren't dealing with multi-state operators coming in and taking a share of their business, or taking the business from them where they have no share?
Well, I think that, one, I'm going to say the cannabis market in New York State is organized in a way where there is opportunity for all to participate. Mm-hmm. It is designed so that we can have small businesses and micro businesses, as well as our medium and large businesses. Mm-hmm. There is space for all of them. I'm going to say that. Mm-hmm. We are currently just opening up our market. Our state legislature decided that they were going to open up with a conditional program. And that conditional program was focused on farmers who were already growing hemp, and to grow and process. And for those who were going to sell it, we looked at people who were formerly convicted, who had some convictions in their past related to cannabis, that also had business experience, so they could try to get it up and running and operational, the actual retail sales
beforehand.
Yes. So this was a very small sliver of people who took the brunt of the work on to their backs and carried New York cannabis for all of us, so that we could see what was working, what wasn't working, and what the challenges might be. So yes, we are being faced with litigations. We are currently in a moment of an injunction where people have had to stop operations and wait for the court to decide whether or not they were going to be allowed to open with the provisional licenses that they were granted. But
Isn't that like pulling the rug out from under them?
Because
Okay.
that is the conditional program. We're moving forward with the real program.
Okay.
So if they want to have a litigation about the conditional program, it's happening. We cannot do anything about it. People can start they can initiate a case anytime they feel like it. But what we are doing is we're learning from mistakes, revamping our entire program, and we're getting ready to open up licenses in, I want to say, 6 of our 9 licensing categories in 2 days. So
okay,
opportunity is here, and people just have to be ready. So within the first 30 days, we want people who are ready to start opening retail to get their applications in. Then we have an additional 30-day window for folks who are not quite as ready. Get it together and come with their completed applications so that we'll be able to issue new licenses that are under a different system and that are not involved in any litigation, and that we hope people will be able to jump in and move forward with. And it is not a limitation on your size or on your business experience or whether or not you have a conviction or if you come from a certain neighborhood. It is an opportunity for all.
Takumba, I think you wanted to share something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that at the Brooklyn Business Center, we've seen lots of different types of businesses in operation or getting started. We mentioned about the health benefits, and there are lots of businesses that are starting that are helping with even soreness from working out, you know, like they're just a variety of ailments, arthritis, other things that people are confronted with that can start that conversation, and then I'm seeing a start of conversation around. So I'm very hopeful in being able to help people become find more jobs. I mean, there's opportunities for what they call bud tenders, which are those individuals that help you to understand what does sativia mean, you know, what is hybrid, you know, what are all these different,
Where do you
and
go
how do
for
I
these
use
programs that you're speaking of? You said the business center. Where can you go for this kind of, because he talked about sativa, indica. I kind of know because, you know, I was one of those seniors that, you know, wanted
You were
to.
early to learn. That's
Early
what that
adopter, yes.
I wanted, you know, just Brooklyn, what can I tell you? It's legal now.
Right,
You
that's
know,
right.
and, you know,
right.
I wanted to try, you know, I had it in my mind, I wanted to try an edible, right? Because it's legal
That's
Brooklyn.
right.
And, you know, it's not my drug of choice, but it's just interesting how, you know, the stigma is so deep. You know?
It's so deep, but there's also
But you need to know because, be curious. There's nothing, yeah, be curious. Be
Exactly.
curious, right?
Be curious and know that there's other opportunities, ancillary opportunities that
There's
for
PR,
businesses.
there's communication, there's
graphic
a whole new
design,
industry, right?
HVAC, a whole new industry is open here, and there's so many roles.
Can I just say, I'm so happy that you mentioned the businesses that already exist that are going to roll cannabis into
Did you say roll
existing
cannabis?
business. They're going to roll cannabis in to their businesses that already exist, and they're going to be expanding and growing existing businesses. We're not looking for everybody to start a new business, to abandon what they've been doing. We're really looking for people. This is what innovation has an opportunity to look like in New York's cannabis sector. It looks like people figuring out where does cannabis help them expand and grow something they've already been working in.
I want to build, you know, very, very briefly just by saying, I think the ancillary business question is really important one that folks should ask, because I think when you look at some of the challenges right now in setting up the market, right? We're talking about people who often have less access to capital, the knowledge gap is greater, and we're asking them to go out in front and be pioneers in the licensed industry, right? And oftentimes without what I would see as an optimal level of resource support so they can weather these early storms. But the people who made the most money during the gold rush were the people who sold the picks and the shovels, right? And so to Chair Wright's point, we're talking about security. We do a big community block party and education event is one of our signatures, hosted in partnership with Bed-Stuy Restoration. And the security firm that we used last year, simply by being proximate to that event, we're opening conversations about how they can expand their business into cannabis security, whether that's events, whether that's the security that is needed at our retail dispensaries and other locations. Trucking and distribution is going to be a huge opportunity. How are we going to get all this product, end-use product from upstate down here where the market is? Professional services, accountants, lawyers, educators, community organizers. I mean, we are building a market, and it's not just the seed to sale, but also everything that's around it that is going to form the foundation for how these operators are going to move.
Excellent.
And Toni, if I may, as a
please.
social impact investor and a provider of capital, equitable capital to businesses that may not have the same resource. Of course, I work at a community development financial institution, a national one, and we struggled with not being able to lend to anything that touches the flower, right? Because of the federal regulations and the continued illegalization from federal law of this, of this industry. However, very much to all the points that were made in looking at businesses of color, businesses in impacted neighborhoods, what type of business do you have where we can provide the capital to grow that part of your business, and then you're able to scale into cannabis. And so that is some of the ways that similar organizations like mine are looking to support these businesses so that they can scale and take on additional work, which may be cannabis. But it is it's a little bit frustrating for a person like me because I'm ready. Let's just go ahead and jump in. Be first. And I understand the legal concerns about it. But even with that, there's still risk. And it's up to whatever organization how much risk they're willing to take. If your industry or corporation is run by a board, they're going to be concerned about that. But the one thing I do say is that you cannot tell me some of the larger financial institutions don't have a bunch of people down in the basement getting ready for the minute, the federal laws are allowed, and then they would jump in, and what that might do is, change the cost of the money, right? Change the access to the money, and then it's no longer as easy for the intended, and New York state law is very specific, thank you, Chair Wright, it's not as easy to get to that, closing that point of equity, right? That was very much written in the law if you don't have all of the available access to capital at the right cost for certain people in the community.
But doesn't the fact that each state has different laws really undermine this market right now and also help with the stigma?
I'm going to say, I don't think it's undermining. I actually think that we're all learning from one another. So the advances that we have in New York are points of learning for all of the other states. So Maryland borrowed some of what we did, right?
Illinois.
And took, right, I was going to say Illinois took, and they launched before we did, but they've been making revisions. We're all in a state of flux. We're learning. And we are figuring out what works and how we can make it work. So New York launched the fund. No other state had that in place. But now we're starting to see equity funds similarly situated. And we're also having broad conversations about how do we, using each state as a proxy, empower our local banks, our state chartered banks, our credit unions. What impact can they have and what role can they play? And like Valerie said, we need somebody doing the research because each of these states have a different market. The money's going to cost a different amount in each state right now.
Because my concern is you've got seniors and you have teenagers, right? Now, teenagers that are going to some of these smoke shops and getting cannabis that is dirty. Meaning, how is the Cannabis Control Board dealing with that?
So we have had a lot of activity with our state legislature. Governor Hochul has been leading the way with this. They've been very deliberate about changing our enforcement rules. This phenomenon has not happened in any other state. a whole bunch of stores popping up that sell illegal weed and dirty weed and everything else. That didn't happen in other states. It happened in New York, and so it was our first glance at it. The legislature came back this year. We have new enforcement rules. OCM is able to go out and initiate a $10,000 fine for the first time that they find somebody selling. We have the ability now to work, to go and file in court, in civil court, so that we can padlock stores. Department of Tax and Finance has also been empowered. And more importantly, we're working with municipalities, and we've given them the opportunity to utilize the information from OCM and Department of Tax and Finance investigations so that they too can go and do padlocking of businesses. And we just had a success story in Syracuse on that. So we're really starting to see collaborative efforts so that all of the agencies are sharing information. We're about to have Department of Labor and workers' comp go and visit some of these establishments. We're using all the tools in the toolbox. This is not a volatile market. We're trying to make it safe so that people who are making investments are able to rely on the security of a solid ground for their business so that they can really grow.
Can I just on the sort of bringing this back to the destigmatization work?
Yes.
You know, from the community perspective, government doesn't have the resources to have eyes and ears everywhere. You know, there are wildly disparate guesstimations for how many illegal or unlicensed smoke shops there are. But even in a best case funding scenario, government can't have eyes and ears everywhere. And so I think it's why it's really important for us to do community level education and destigmatization, because I know when I go down the street to my bodega, if I'm seeing them selling to 15, 16, 17-year-olds, I'm not waiting to call OCM. Like, I'm wrecking shop right there, because that's my block, that's my neighborhood, those are people I know.
I just want to thank Tremaine Wright, Chairwoman of the Cannabis Control Board, and Jason Starr, and to my savvy panelistas. Thank you so much. And we will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.